Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another casual stroll through Lord of the Rings Online. My name is Matt Elliott. I go by Scenario on the message boards, and I'm a senior world designer here on Lord of the Rings and have been working on this for a while. For those of you that are unfamiliar with this stream, this is a world design focused stream where we're going to be running around the landscape, talking about what goes into building the landscape, and just answering your in general your questions about how we do what we do. And yeah, giving you a little bit of a behind the scenes peek. This stream, as I said, is a world design stream, so we will not be talking about things like balance. We're not going to be talking about things like, lag. We'll maybe talk a little bit about the work that went into having things like Angmar and Mordor happen for us. But other than that, I'm not going to be able to go into super details. Basically, anything that's outside of my area, we're just not going to talk about it. If you do have questions for things that are outside of my purview, I highly recommend dropping into Court of the Rings on Fridays at noon Eastern Time, or dropping into the message boards, or just waiting for a stream when there is someone that can answer those things. I know Orion is often regularly either pitching in on streams or running his own, and eventually he and I will have our next we have a Cave Troll stream, but for the time being, you guys got me. So let us take a look at the stream, and yeah, let's get going. So I felt like I really needed to make the joke that I am going to be casually strolling through Mordor. Where we left off last time was right behind us in the wastes. We didn't get to see all of the wastes and all of the dramatic action that was happening in there through the instances, because my characters aren't really set up for that. But we did take a tour through the landscape and talked a little bit about it. And now here we are at the Black Gate. The way it is right now is assembled, but what will happen is players do get the opportunity to kind of go through here as it's been destroyed. What the gate looks like is very dependent on your quest state. Right now, my quest state is not set up in a way to show the gate destroyed. So as we walk forward, we're just gonna run right through it. So yeah. Mordor is another one of the areas that I did not have a hand specifically in building myself. So my first experiences going through Mordor has been as a player, and completing the epic story and the Battle of the Wastes was really, really amazing. It was such a well done experience, at least as far as telling the story and showing the world change, which again would be visible here if I was in a specific kind of quest state. It was really exciting to play through. A little bittersweet knowing that with that battle complete, I was working towards the dropping of the ring into the fires of Mount Doom, but it was still one of the most cinematic experiences I think we've had in Lord of the Rings. Couple of comments in here. Sam Burke says that Mordor marks 10 years of LOTRO. It came out the same year as the 10th anniversary. And I think for any MMO, 10 years is a landmark achievement, right? I came back to work when I came back to working at SSG. I did a lot of work on the dungeons and instances associated with Where Dragons Dwell, which I believe was not the update directly after this, but the follow-up. After Dale and Northern Mirkwood were introduced. So, go down through here. So this is going to be we've got 4 areas of Mordor that we're going to run through. We've got Dor Ammarth, we've got Udun, we've got Lingris, 5. Dor Ammarth, Udun, Lingris, Talith Urwi, and Agarnath, as well as a bunch of dungeons. We may not be able to get to the dungeons if I slow myself down so that I'm more strolling than just speeding across everything. I think one of the challenges with building an area like Mordor, Angmar, Moria, even and Gundabad is these are all very dark and oppressive areas, and it's really hard to sell that kind of experience. I love these things, by the way. These are neat. Even though, there's nothing down there, they're just one of my favorite props, especially in areas where monsters start popping out. What location am I? All right, I'm in the right. I'm on the right layer. Yay! It's just such a satisfying feeling being in this space. I'm not sure why mobs aren't. Oh, there's some mobs. Okay, I was worried for a second. I was like, this seems really empty. Was wondering if something had been broken. So Yao says, can you just destroy the gate? So unfortunately, the way that gate is set up, it's not like it's an object you can select in the world. Even when you are in a quest state where it has been destroyed, the logic behind it is really, it knows how to change its phase based off of your quest state. And unlike what we've done in the past with quest NPCs that like phase in and out, I believe this is just an entity that changes how it renders based off of your quest state, which isn't something we do all that often. Let's see, a few more questions or a few more comments. Norbert says the Battle of Pelennor Fields and the Battle of Moranen are by far the best scenes parts of the game. I remember when we did the Ringforge in Eregion and how excited the designers were to be able to play with camera controls through scripting, and honestly, like how excited they were, but also how kind of nervous they were about it, because there was this worry that the way we had been telling our story all the way up through to that point had very much been focused on still allowing players to maintain control of their character while they were in that space. And then when we introduced Eregion and the battle that happened at the Ringforge, we took that control of the camera away. Like normally when we needed players to kind of be in one spot for storytelling purposes, we effectively stun you. We lock you down so you can't really move around. And that does the job. But it doesn't really allow us to show cinematically what's going on. But in the case of Eregion, the designer who was working on it very specifically wanted to be able to use the camera in a way to tell the story. And we were really anxious about the player reaction to that. And haven't done it a ton ever since. And the Battle of Pelennor Fields and the Battle of Moranen are both examples of times where we've, kind of taken the leap and taken control of people's characters just completely away from them in order to really, really show the cinematics of what we were making. All right, we're clipping along. Let's get a good view. I think one of the things that's a challenge with Mordor in particular, because it's so dark, is it's really hard to make things at a distance really be visible. Like you can get these awesome silhouettes, which is great, but it's really hard to just have your near space stand out because it's black on black on black on black, and it feels like that's appropriate for a place like Mordor, but it is not. let's rocket jump myself back up because I do not want to fall down the mountain yet. Um, it's appropriate for Mordor, but it can make the experience of um, being in Mordor um, oppressive. And I think, at least I know from my own experience playing through Mordor, I really did need to take some breaks while playing it because it's that hard to look and see and feel what's going on. Um, let's see. So Druid's Fire says Mordor definitely needs more stable masters. It takes forever to ride around during the epic. I don't disagree with that. I think there's certainly a design approach to places like Gondor and Mordor where it feels like the designers, when it came to the travel systems, went a little bit less is more. Um, and when we did King's Gondor and I did the travel network for that, I made very specific efforts um, to kind of rectify that and have the travel system really be robust in a way that would allow players to really traverse the landscape without feeling like they were um, going too long without finding some sort of refuge that they could pause and kind of like save their progress by just you know using the stable master or arriving at a stable master, right? Like stable masters are a lot more than just easy, to help ease travel. They're kind of your checkpoints. They're your ways to get around the world without feeling like you're going to have to do a lot of work in order to get back to where you were. Um, and I think we've learned a lot over the years about how to effectively make travel networks and, thinking about areas that really could use better travel networks. And then there's always that like tension between like we make these changes and players um, might have to go and rediscover those destinations. But I feel like that's a trade-off that you know personally I'm willing to kind of force on everyone in order to have a much better travel experience in a region once it's been fully unlocked again. I feel like Trollshaws is an example of that, right? I did a lot of work on kind of revamping the travel network in Trollshaws, adding new spots, and the easiest way to do that was to kind of force everyone to have to re-explore the Trollshaws. I know some people weren't happy about it because it felt like they were being forced back to a spot that they maybe didn't really want to go back to. But that's where things went. All right. So Druid's Fire says, I do like the tech that makes it look like there's an actual tunnel underneath those hatches. Yeah, so depth carving is a tool that we have had for a very long time now. It was something that we introduced as basically as our solution for getting doors to not just be black planes when you open them, right? Like we wanted our doors to look like they were leading into an interior. And mostly by and large, that's kind of where we stopped using them. But then we've used them here and there for other creative solutions. Like when I was building the hub, the interior, the big hub interior in Ironfold. I don't remember its name off the top of my head. But when I was building that, I wanted to make it look like it was kind of a lived-in space. So I tried to use the depth carving system in ways that kind of gave fake interiors to a lot of the a lot of the like little buildings and whatnot. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, and I had to like remove some things. But it's a really neat system, and it's something that I think we can do a lot of interesting things with um, when there's an opportunity to do that. Let's see. Since we're talking about those kinds of things, any chance to see another Hitbolt style area in the future? I don't want to say never. I think Hitbolt was a very ambitious undertaking by a very ambitious designer. And one of the challenges with ambitious areas like that is that the upkeep for it, bug fixing and whatnot, often building something like that often comes with a lot of personal memory on how it works. And once that person leaves, the system kind of gets a little hard to sort out because like the person that knew it like the back of their hand. Um, but as when they're gone, how do you maintain it? I think Hitbolt, a Hitbolt like experience could be very compelling um, if it was a little bit more constrained and a little bit more. Um, I think just a little bit smaller. Hitbolt was really really big, and because it was acting as the end game for that period of time. Um, and I don't think we would necessarily want something like that for future offerings. We wouldn't necessarily want it to be the the end game experience that Hitbolt was, but I think there's an opportunity to make it something that is kind of an interesting way to personalize your content experience. Like things like the Normandy from Mass Effect. A space that can reflect your achievements, and it's something that I've been talking with Orion about when it comes to thinking about what what my next little side project task is going to be. Because I have some ideas that kind of lean in that Hitbolt direction, not at as much of a grand scale as that though. Let's see. Glisten Mist says Mordor was where I learned about ambient brightness, gamma, contrast sliders, and options. Before I learned about them, I was so wandering in the dark. Yeah, I think some areas are better than others. I think the hardest part about Mordor in general is it's got very black cliffs, and it's got very dark terrain once you're off the road, so it can make it very hard to see. And the lighting in general in Mordor is very dark. So it is this very oppressive experience, and part of it is by design, part of it is we could probably tweak it to be a little bit better, similar to I've talked about this in North Mirkwood as well. Like, it's definitely got a really strong flavor to it. Like you look at Lingris here, and you just have these really strong, impressive silhouettes of mountains and structures and whatnot, when the high mountains are not just making it a wall of black. Norbert asks, what part of Mordor did you find the best done since you didn't have a part of the building process? I think that for me, the areas that I enjoyed running around most was Agarnath and some portions of Talith Urwi. I think I think this area in particular really does sell um, the fantasy, the user fantasy of, you know, the Mount Doom lava fields and just this dangerous lava fueled area. But I really like the kind of visual language departure that is Agarnath. You know, it's like they took, um, you know, it's like they took original intent of um, the original intent of the Red Swamp and just amped it up and introduced architecture that is a level of vampire gothic that we've never really had in Lotro. Um, so I think that was really like interesting and compelling for me. Let's see. Ba-ba-ba-ba. So we'll continue our run through here. Lingris is another area that like really hits great creepy vibes, and I've honestly been in what I'm working on right now. There are aspects of Lingris that I've kind of looked at and been inspired by in building some of what I've been building. Not to say it's a spider. What I'm building is a spider-infested field of awfulness, but it's definitely, there are aspects of it that I looked at and was like, oh, okay, like I want to try to, you know, reintroduce some of these assets or find ways to use these assets in different ways, or create new things that kind of evoke a similar kind of uncomfortable feeling as you're running around in the space. So I do apologize that I'm just kind of like fast tracking through some of these areas because we do have a lot to cover and there's a lot of dungeons. So I want to make sure that we have enough time to go through those. So I probably won't make my way up to Torek Ungol quite yet, if I do at all, but we'll be popping into there through some of the dungeon stuff. That is, you know, that's what I'm planning to do. So. I remember treading down through this valley. When I first came back to work on Lotro 2, I had gotten a lot of bugs and a number of to just kind of like reacclimate myself. You know, that's a good way to good way for new people or people that have been off the project for a while to come back onto it to kind of reacclimate to working with things is just to hit the bugs. And you know, I remember a ton of bugs that I had here for like stuck spots in cliffs and whatnot, and I'd like teleport in and I'd just be like staring at a cliff wall and could not for the life of me figure out what I was looking for, where I was looking, because it was just so dark. Good old Mount Doom. I think I had a number of bugs in this little hub at one point as well. Will the Morgul Vale be in a different stream, or will you do that as well? I'm treating Morgul Vale as its own separate space. Kind of how I used to do these streams is I would put up a poll asking players to vote on what region to do. But I kind of found like what would happen when I did that is people would vote for like the best regions. And then they wouldn't really be interested in the regions that were not their favorites. So it kind of led to some kind of top-heavy streaming, right? Like where, oh, we did the Shire first, but now we're doing the Lone Lands. Like, so once we got through Eriador and Rovanian, I just decided to follow the content path through everything. Makes it a little bit easier. So there are going to be some areas that we've already previewed as part of like new release previews that we won't be getting to um, because we've already done a preview stream for them. But something like the Morgul Vale and Minas Morgul, um, that would be its own stream. Um, so going through those areas that we haven't done yet, we'll just be doing them in sequential order, chronological order. Uh, Druid's Fire says, I like to compare the maps of Doramarth and Mordor besieged Doramarth. Yeah, that was I didn't work on that region specifically because I was working on the Morgul Vale stuff. Um, but that region was uh, a really interesting challenge because it was fun to um, recreate kind of what we've been through before. Um, like go through the areas that we've been through, that we've seen, and reinterpret them as a new space. And I think that kind of started our learning process, and in how we can make regions set in different time periods and how we can make them feel unique and distinct from each other. I think if there was one thing, and I can elaborate more when we do eventually get to Mordor Besieged, one thing that I feel like we didn't really land quite as well as I would have liked was the sense of active war happening in there. The concept that this is supposed to be the like big battle um, with Sauron, and I feel like the landscape didn't reflect that too much, and that's why when we did Elder Slade at War, I tried to make sure that we had things like trenches and battles going on to sell that it was different enough and justified enough to be its own space visually through its storytelling. Fashion Ball from Norbert. Fashion Ball. Now that is a place I don't want to see ever again. I know there are some people that have driven themselves bonkers trying to max out their reputations on both sides there, and it's possible. It is just so much work. It is a lot of work to do that. Um, so, like, kudos to those that have put that work in. Let's see. Aaron Thorne says, you've discussed your return and getting back into the groove. What is the most challenging project you have been a part of thus far? In game development, I would say building Moria was probably the most challenging thing because it really required us to think in new ways. I've done a lot of work in project management and whatnot outside of that have had their own unique challenges, in part because sometimes there are stakeholders that can be somewhat difficult to work with, or that have different expectations. So project management stuff, there are certainly character interactions that can make it challenging and interesting. But in game development, I would say, oh hey, my gloom or my shadow is ticking up. In terms of game development, I would say that the biggest challenge had been Moria. After that, probably I took part in a small indie project called Rudo Resurrection that we tried to get kickstarted, and that didn't really end up going anywhere. And that was just a challenge of like, okay, like this is trying to do it on our own. How do we do this? What happens if the Kickstarter doesn't work? Like those sorts of things, and that kind of role is much more of a, you know, more business than anything. And if you're not someone who has worked in that kind of role in managing a business, you've only been in design, it can be pretty challenging to kind of switch into that. All right. Druid's Fire asks, will we ever get a true path to Sameth Nur so that we can properly throw ourselves and our chickens into the crack of doom? I mean, accidentally I fell into it once during that one instance where you find Frodo and Sam because I thought there was invisible walls, but it would be nice to go up there on landscape. I think I'm not sure on that. I think that space is a very specifically, tightly designed space, and I'm not entirely sure how it fits in with the rest of the world. So I don't have a good answer for that. Don't want to say never, but it might not be something that is a priority for us for a very long time. Hypothetical question from Norbert. If SSG were to get the rights to other writings of Tolkien, which landscape in what time would you like to build the most? I think the... See, now I have to think a little bit more about that. Like Morgoth Citadel in the far northern wastes would be interesting in the similar vein to Mordor, where it's just like how evil and how crazy and nightmarish can you make it. But also, like, there's something very compelling about building a space that is just lush rolling hills and forests and mountains. And, I feel like building areas like that would just be very relaxing. Building a space like Mordor, where you have to hit those expectations for peak evil and whatnot, can be exhausting. So yeah, like maybe the area, Minhiriath and the Western Elf Kingdoms. I feel like those would probably scratch my itch for like cozy creation, and I don't necessarily need a different age, first age, second age, third age. I don't need a different age to have that kind of building, that kind of creation to be enjoyable and satisfying for me. So hopefully that answers the question. Was not too much of a dodge. All right, let's map it up. Where am I? I'm here. So I want to work my way all the way around. I'm not as far as long as I thought I was, but we still have plenty of time. We're making a good pace. So Dilnarin says, not sure if you take new player questions, but as someone torn between captain and champion, what would you recommend for someone who will spend a lot of time playing solo, but eventually want to group and try some of the harder content? I think, and I don't know if Orion is listening into this chat, but I think our systemic goals are to try to, let me just shortcut my way through the blackness. I think some of our systemic goals are to try to make most classes as viable as possible in a variety of settings, whether it's, you're playing solo or you're playing in a group. And it really depends on the character fantasy that you enjoy. I think I'm not one to really advocate for one class over another because everyone's got different goals and expectations with the characters that they're playing. I currently play a Bjorning, but I've played Guardians, I've played Burglars. So I think it really comes down to what style of play you want to play. And I think both captains and champions are perfectly soloable, and both have their uses when it comes to playing in group content. My suggestion, I guess, would be flip a coin. Um, try to get a feel for the character. Give it 20 levels and see how you like that. See if it feels like what you want, and then decide, and then go from there. Um, so Hobbit Lad says, "Can you visit the men in the swamp today?" I'm not sure what you're referring to, unless you're talking about um, Bull Rude up here, maybe, or a hub. Aaron North says, "It's kind of like asking what's the best car. You have to try them to see how you feel." We're working our way up there. We're getting through, evil Firelands, and we're about to go to evil Swamplands. Do I want to go this way? Yeah, we'll go up here. We got a little bit of extra time. We got a little bit of time. I'm looking at these stone walls here, and I'm feeling like that's another case of the um, appearance stuff kind of bleeding in. Like I was in an area that had plain stone walls, and now that I'm here, the appearances are being applied onto them because we made some changes to help things be a little bit more performant. Oh, door is closed. Or is it? Boop. Pay no attention to the green lands of Nirn in the distance. All right. Well, let's head back on the path, and we'll go from there. Um, so, since we're in Mordor, I just want to say to everyone that has been playing on Mordor and Angmar, like, you all made this last weekend a very awesome weekend for Lord of the Rings. The amount of love that we've been seeing, the amount of positivity we've been seeing, you all have been having a great time playing in those, both in those servers, but also playing with birding and whatnot. It's really awesome to see the kind of positivity and excitement about the servers and the update that we've been seeing. So it's really great to see that. We're really happy that people are happy. It's a nice feeling to feel like we hit the mark with what we've been working on, with the hobby, and what we've been working on with getting the servers up and running. And it's given us a lot of awesome data between all the various playtests that we've been running for the servers, as well as just getting ready for the update in general with birding and whatnot. There's been a lot of positivity coming out of it. There's been a lot like good constructive stuff as well, and positivity and constructivity can exist in the same space. And it's really great to see that everyone has been so engaged with it, or as engaged with it as they have been. Popping into YouTube and taking a look at the latest videos that are uploaded by everyone, and seeing how excited people are. It's great to see. So thank you all for being excited and being engaged with and enthusiastic about what's happened over the last couple of weeks for LOTRO. All right, let's see if there's any other questions while we're going along. Druid's Fire says, "I'm happy to get to play on new servers now that I'm back from Gen Con and have a break in university business for a little bit." Bloodborne says, "How has the 64-bit server been looking on our end so far?" The 64-bit server has been like pretty good. I think there's still some stuff that we are, working to iron out. There's definitely like things here and there that we're trying to like nail down. But overall, looking at, I'm wondering if what I'm seeing here. Sorry to disrupt my thought. I think this is probably the lighting is not happy. That would be my guess now that I think about it. There's probably too many light sources, so it doesn't know which ones to use. That makes sense. But anyways, yeah, so the 64-bit servers, Mordor, Angmar, legendary servers, like they've been doing great for us. I think we've been able to get a lot of really, really good information out of it. We've been able to change the time of day so maybe it's a little bit lighter. There we go. That's a little bit better. I can see what I'm doing now. I think it's done a lot for us in terms of really figuring out or helping find ways to address the performance issues that we've been having. I think there are still going to be some technical hurdles that we'll need to figure out because the 64-bit server is new for us. It's something that we haven't really had a ton of time working with. It's something we've been working on for a long while now, but it's not something that we've been able to work with for a while now. So we're really happy with the information that we're getting when it comes to the servers, like the logs that we're getting, even when there have been server issues that have resulted in like a crash. That's still super valuable data for us, and I think it's all of it is really just helping us further narrow in on where we can fix things, and it's really promising as well. We look at it and we can see where we've done right, where we've done wrong, and think about what other changes we can make as we continue to noodle on it. Sam Burke says, "My first character in LOTRO was a Rohirrim champion. It was fun and easy class to get introduced to the game with." Yeah, I think all of to go back to the class discussion stuff, I think all of our classes do have like difficulty labels on them when you go to create your character. So that can also give you a little bit of sense of how much, what the level of effort in playing that character will be. Viznak here is alone worth the play in this part is worth the play in this part of Mordor. Yeah, Viznak was great. I think Viznak is something that really landed very well and has been something that designers since have tried to achieve again, and I feel like there's just people have Viznak in their mind, and it makes it really hard to feel like an evil character could be as compelling as him. I think when we did, there was the Orc Hub in the Shield Isles, and I think some of that was intended to try to like recapture the feeling of Viznak, and I don't think we quite hit the mark with it because I think it felt too much just like we're making a new we're just making a town with orcs in it as opposed to really something that is as heavily character driven as Viznak was. I think there's certainly an interest in us exploring exploring the stories of the evil folk, air quotes, of the game world, now that the force that was kind of driving them is no longer present. What does the lack of Sauron mean for orcs? What does that mean for the people of Umbar, for the Haradrim, for the Easterlings? And I think over time we'll take a look at those things. I think the tricky thing is trying to have them have their own characters, have their own motivations, but not just immediately turn them into another ally, right? Like, it's okay for people to disagree with each other, and it's okay for there to be different viewpoints in the world. And it's very easy to just be like, oh, well, they're, the big bad guy that was subjugating them is no longer around, so clearly they can become good guys now. And it's like, that's, they're still at odds, right? Like, they're still seeing Gondor as an opposing force that can potentially threaten their way of life. But I think lacking Sauron's influence, they can think a little bit more about how they want to approach that opposition, right? They don't have to immediately meet it with violence, or they don't even have to care about Gondor anymore, and they can just go about doing their own thing, which I think a lot of people in a lot of the characters in Umbar itself are kind of leaning towards, where it's like, well, we're not being subjugated anymore. We just want to do our thing. Let's see. So Hobbit Lad says the introduction of orc allies has been really cool, and Druid's Fire says it's nice to flesh out orcs so that they're not just one-dimensional. That's there's even lore to support orcs going off and doing their own thing when they're not dominated by Sauron. And Arabani says, can't say I appreciate orcs as allies. A good orc, dead orc. So yeah, I think one of the things that we tried to do with Umbar was to kind of make people a little uncomfortable, because they were so used to being the hero of the story, super used to it, and now they're in this space where they're in this region where they're not necessarily the heroes, right? They're not the good guys in the eyes of the populace, and that's very challenging. And I can completely understand why some people don't like that, right? It's not always fun to be challenged in that way, because the majority of the game you're being told that your character is this one thing, and now you're coming up against this whole group of people that don't necessarily fall in line with that prescription of your character, right? They're like, yeah, fine, do what you want, but leave me alone to do my own thing, kind of stuff. This was a really running around here in Saragost. This is just a really interesting, different kind of feel. When I built the, I forget what it was called, what it eventually became named, but I built the Poison Gardens in New Carndum. I really looked at this region, this area, as kind of an inspiration for what could be done, and what interesting ways there are to make an evil looking garden, and the colors and feels of it, black iron and whatnot. I think Saragost and Agraneith do a lot of things really, really well, and do a lot of things really do it right, from the perspective of building the space. The water is a little ketchup-y, but I think the pure color of it just helps sell the character of it. Let's see. Aaron Thorne says, I was pretty shocked when I entered the village in Enedwaith where we were assisting the half-orcs. Feels disjointed. And I think it's good to kind of have some of that in the game, right? Like, it shakes you out of your routines and habits when you run into something narratively that is different than what you've been experiencing before, and can kind of reboot you a little bit. Like, whether or not you enjoyed it, like, it kind of sticks with you and makes you think a little bit more about your character, and how that character interacts with the world. Let's see. All right, we're gonna wrap around and head up into Dora Marth now, through the back way as opposed through the main way. So Hobbit Lad says, I also appreciate the separation of cultures between Umbar and Gondor Elvish lands. They are more guarded and suspicious due to their recent subjugation by Sauron. Yeah, and I think that's the biggest storytelling beat for me that I think is most important. Is, you, with Umbar anyways, you had this culture that wasn't inherently written as an evil culture, but they were certainly a subjugated culture. And with the defeat of Sauron, they're kind of free to do their own thing. And it's important to kind of establish for them what their own thing is, right? Druid's Fire says, overcoming your own headcanon is a thing in Tolkien studies. How well do you really know what you read is an interesting thing. One of the cool things about Corey's Exploring LOTRO class is how many of my long-held headcanons had to be set aside due to a new close reading of the text. Yeah, and I think any art, there's certainly a degree of interpretation that comes with that art, and interpretation, again, you get stuck with yours, and then someone else has a different way of seeing things, and it can be very easy to fight against that if it's not what you're used to seeing. But it can also be a light bulb moment for you when you start seeing things, when you start seeing characters and situations from a different character's perspective. So here we are we're going to take a break from the very meta conversation that we're just having to come back to Dora Marth, where we see the ruins of Barad-dûr and places that will become familiar places in a future stream as we get to the Mordor besieged version of Dora Marth. I think one of the things that I remember when we were building the version of the full version, the undestroyed version, was a lot of people being worried that it was too kind of squat and fat looking. When the reality is, like, I think we often have towers that don't entirely feel like they jive with what the reality of physics and concrete and whatnot would produce. Some of them just seem like a little too narrow and a little too tall, and they need that like extra bit of buttressing. They need that extra bit of support to feel like something that would be actually like viable in a real world situation. All right. So Softsnake says, is there any way to convince us to remove Kingstead Homestead from the landscape and put it in a private location of the game? I remember that stone you mentioned a few live streams ago that you remove in Rivendell, which changed the game of a kinship. Just saying. That isn't going anywhere. Eventually, My hope is to be able to tear down the invisible walls around it on I0 so it's not an obstruction. Um, it has long been on my plate to kind of do that sort of investigation and to get some engineering time to help me look at that and see, like, is there really a reason why we need the instance zero version of housing neighborhoods to be kind of blocked off like they are right now. Um, and should that ever, should I ever manage to get that time and get that work done, then those invisible walls around it will certainly come down. And that will kind of address I think, the concern that a lot of people have of it just being this big chunk of impassability in the middle of everything. I know some people are vehemently against it. It's there, it's staying there. The complications of moving anything at this point, since people have houses there, are too great to risk. So, let's see. Druid's Fire asks, but it will still be visible. Yes, yeah. I'm not going to make it invisible, but it is not moving. Sorry, Snake. All right, as we continue through here, it is really like, because my more recent memory of these spaces is going through and doing bug work and whatnot in Mordor Besieged. So it's like seeing the silhouettes that I remember, but just in a very different setting, different day files, different lighting, different like level of decay on things. It's a different experience running around through here. All right, we are almost done with our landscape, and we don't have enough time to get through the dungeons, unfortunately, because these were big areas. I think one of the things too that I observed both in this region and things like Dale and Mirkwood and North Mirkwood and Gondor is these concepts of mega areas. When we first built the game, we kind of had a bunch of smaller areas within a region, and it's useful to have those as navigation tools, so you kind of know, oh, I'm in Bree Fields, or I'm in the Horse Fields, or I'm in Midgewater, as opposed to just knowing that I'm in Breland. And I think one of the things that can make places like Mordor and Gondor a little bit challenging to navigate is you don't have those breaks in the landscape where you can say, oh, I'm in this chunk of the landscape, or I'm that chunk of the landscape, because, like, for example, Dora Marth, all of this is Dora Marth, and in how we used to build things, really it could be probably 1, 2, 3, like 4 smaller areas of Dora Marth to better help with navigation through the space. That's one of the things that when I started doing more of the back-end setup and whatnot, I've tried to push for, is having those smaller delineations of landscape within a region in order to just help navigation through, so you kind of have a better sense of what parts of a region that you are in. Sawsnake says Mordor would have been a great starter PvE area for creeps with Barad-dûr before destruction. If the creep content experience was bigger than it was, certainly. I think one thing that we've kind of discovered as part of just work that we've done with PvP or PvMP over the years is people really just like their Etten Wars. And the idea of going beyond that is a little challenging for them. They don't necessarily want to engage in it. I'm not saying this is everybody, but it's just from like kind of what we've observed over time. And I think it would be great to have more areas for players to explore, for creeps to explore. But the more space you give people for something like that, the more spread out the conflict is, and that kind of works against the idea of these big, good versus evil battles in the Ettin Wars. Um, has anyone reported the glitch that sometimes seen recently happens in the lower right corner as moving in texel heavy environments? I'm not sure what you're talking about, Arathorn. I highly encourage you to file bugs on it if you have something that is easily repeatable. And by having a bug means that we can more easily investigate it. But not knowing specifically what you're talking about, I can't really um, speak to the issue. But if you know a location where it's happening, or if you know a repeatable way to make it happen, then by all means file a bug with the information you have, and we can take a look. All right, everyone. Well, we are at 3:02 now, so I think I'm going to wrap it up. We got through all of the landscape areas. We did not get into any of the dungeons, and maybe that's a stream for another time. But thank you, everyone, for hanging out with me, asking some questions, and taking a tour through Mordor. I did simply stroll in, but it was a very fast stroll. So coming up, we've got, I think we have another Bull Roar coming up with some new stuff for folks to play and to test out. I'm not sure when that's happening, and I don't know the specific details of what we announced for it so far, so I'm not going to say anything beyond keep an eye out for news of a new round of Bull Roar testing. Starting in September, we're going to be doing so many streams. So our next first Wednesday of the month stream is going to be we have a cave troll with myself and Orion. And then after that, we go right into Update 42 previews, where I will, for 4 to 5 weeks, be streaming a new preview for every week after that. So looking forward to showing off what we've been working on and to giving you all an opportunity to check things out. So anyways, thanks a lot. Thank you all for having so much fun in Mordor, Angmar, and with birding. And we'll see you all in about a month.